This is Julie Pearson, Little Thunder. Today is Wednesday, May 22nd, and I'm interviewing Shannon Gray as part of the Oklahoma Native Artist Project for the Oklahoma Oral History Research Program at Oklahoma State University. We're at Shan's home in Edmond, Oklahoma. Shan, you're an artist from a family of artists. Your public sculptures can be seen throughout central Oklahoma, from Edmond to Norman to Guthrie. Your subject matter is as often non-native as it is native, but your pride in your Osage identity shows up clearly in your work. Thank you for taking the time to talk with me.
Certainly.
Where were you born and where did you grow up?
I was born in Bartlesville, Oklahoma, and I grew up in Bartlesville. Great place, especially the 50s.
What did your mother and father do for a living?
My mother was a stay-at-home mom, looked after us. My dad worked for Phillips Petroleum. I think that was about the time I was born. He went to work at Phillips. He was a police lieutenant in Bartlesville after the war, and worked his way up. And you need to stop me sometimes because I ramble on, and one thought leads to another. And he was convinced by some execs at Phillips to run for police chief, and he knew if he lost, he'd lose his job. And he lost, and that's how he went to work for Phillips. The fellows, the execs that wanted him to run against the chief of police, got him on at the research center, and he worked there for 29 years.
Wow. Now, you have two brothers and a sister, is that right? All of whom
I'm
are
the mistake
artists?
of the family. Greg, the oldest, is 11 years older than me, and then Clancy's 9, or about 8, and then my sister's 7.
Mm-hmm. So you're the youngest.
Yes.
Were you close to your grandparents on either side?
My grandparents were deceased on my dad's side. He's full-blood Osage. I always found it interesting. My grandfather was orphaned during the Indian Wars in the 1860s. And my dad was the last child of Clarence Gray Sr., and his mother died giving birth to him in the 20s. So from about 1860 to when I was born in 1956, that's just 3 generations, which I always thought,
Right.
time. And that means a lot to me, the historical aspect that, we're a very young country, young state. And when you're young, time seems so long, and it's really not long at all.
What is your first memory of seeing native art?
uh, 2, 3, very, very early.
What was it?
It was a horse and rider.
A painting?
I vaguely remember a buffalo. I don't know if it was a tiger or not.
In your home or elsewhere?
I don't know.
How about your first memory of doing art?
First memory. Good question, but I love crime shows, Law and Order. And they always ask, where were you on May 7th, 2005? Well, I ate lunch 2 hours ago. Not only can I not tell you where I ate, I can't tell you what I ate. So you're asking me questions I feel...
That's okay.
All right.
You don't have to, just...
I guess it was 4. I was 4 years old.
Maybe 4.
My mom kept it. It was Clancy and Gail were giving art lessons, and Jack Grace noticed that I was doodling, and told my mom I could stay because I was a quiet kid and I liked to draw. And I remember doing a dinosaur, and I think I was like 3 or something, pretty young.
So this was the private art lessons that your
Brother and
siblings
sister.
were getting, and and he noticed that you could draw too and let you
It was
stay.
a summer thing.
So did you continue to work under him? Did he continue to give you little assignments, or?
Yes, and he moved. I don't recall why, but I only went for 2 or 3 years. I think it was during the summer when the sports was going on and there was a conflict there, but it made a huge impression on me, yes.
Were you and your siblings competitive in terms of art?
No, there was too much time. They were quite a bit older than I was. I know they were always coming to me to do things for them, like school assignments. They go, "Hey, would you draw this?" And I go, "Sure." I didn't think anything of it, but I must have done 1,000 Wildcats over a 10-year period. That was college high Wildcats.
How about your other art experiences in elementary school or middle school?
Well, a valuable lesson that I learned, it was 3rd grade, and there were 2 artists in the class, myself and a fellow named Kim. For Thanksgiving, they had Kim do the Pilgrim and I was to do the Indian. And we had crayons. And I did my Indian in buckskins, and I wanted to catch the silver of wet buckskins. And of course, crayons clash real bad. So you have brown and silver. And the 3rd grade teacher, is the word admonished? Chastised me for clashing those crayons. And I didn't pick up another pencil or crayon until 7th grade. And it was like, you don't know what I mean, even then I knew what I was doing. That sounds pretty pretentious of me, but, she didn't understand what I was trying to do. And it taught me to be very careful what I say to young artists, because the effect it had on me.
Right.
And going up, should I just keep talking? In 7th grade, my brother Clancy, who's always been a big influence in my life, because, man, it's an easy A, take art lessons. Take art class. And so I did. And I remember in 9th grade, there was a science contest for a poster, and I did this picture of Einstein and EMC equals. But I remember all week I was just nervous about that competition. And I won, but I never did another competition after that. Because, one, who were they to judge me? What are their qualifications as artists? And if they are, now this is terrible, but I thought, well, I want it to be worth something. What got me over the hump, and I like telling, I have some kids that I instruct. I always, I wanted to be a homicide detective or a movie director. I like to direct films, storytelling, if you will, or sculptor. Those were my 3 main goals since I was little. And I ended up going back to art, to sculpting, because it just seemed like something I wanted to do, that I felt driven to do. Though I tried the others, and I probably would have been successful at that. I attribute that to my mom and dad. They just gave us a lot of confidence that you work hard enough and you know your business, then given the opportunity, you'll be ready to take advantage of it. And I find that to be a truism that just prepare, and when opportunity knocks, you'll be ready. Though I wasn't ready when art world. Side note, I kind of I forgot the right term you use. I lived in Denver and Chicago and Dallas and LA, and just trying to get a feel of the country and other people. And I recall I decided I wanted to go to Kansas City Art Institute. And so I worked real hard on an art portfolio. Our apartment got broken into. They stole the stereo, the TV, and my art portfolio that I'd worked.
My goodness.
And so I never tried to get into there's too much work in that. Now, I know someday.
And how old were you?
22, 23. And so that kind of pushed me into other directions. Mm-hmm. It was after a really bad automobile accident that to this day don't know where Gary saw my work. But I had broke my back, I had a fractured skull, and I could no longer do the regular manual jobs in the oil field, which was, at the time I was working out in the oil fields. He said, do you want a job? I have a small ad agency. Would you like to go to work for us as an illustrator? And I said, well, yeah, but how do you know what my work is? And he goes, oh, I've seen it. You're really good. So I said, okay. And that's how I got back into art. It was, if that hadn't happened. Actually, I'd been working for a film production company. This has been 1980. And they were going to do a film that required a lot of young Indian kids riding horses. And they asked, do you ride? And I said, yes. And they said, can you instruct children on how to ride? And I said, well, certainly. I need to go, to myself, I'm going back. I was saying, man, I need to get back there and start riding. It's not something that's like swimming, but my dad was killed in an automobile accident. I was supposed to go back that Saturday, back to L.A., and that's one thing I really liked that I learned by living in other parts of the country. When I moved out to Los Angeles, I had work the second day I was there. I got off the plane, met a friend who'd been out there a couple of years, and if you had a good work ethic and had the ability to communicate, work was plentiful. And to this day, I'm amazed how quickly. I was there 3 days, and someone asked me to interview with CBS for the mailroom, and I got hired that day. And then that afternoon, I got hired on a production company as a gaffer, which is a lighting personnel. I just love that business because it's a very people-oriented business. Though at the time, I was not mature enough to. I just figured there'd always be work there, and I ran with a pretty wild crowd. So when I came back that following summer to learn how to teach kids how to ride, my dad had been killed in that accident. So I was supposed to leave that Saturday. He was killed on Friday. And so it kind of like discombobulated all my timing. And something inside said, don't go back. And I never went back. And I part of me wishes I would have gone back, but I'm certainly happy with the life I have now. So I guess things happen for the best.
So this was post-college, is that right? This is after college.
I'd gone to OSU, and they had some great people in the art world, but you know, the whole art's such a subjective business anyway, and I always lean to your more classical type of work, realism, super realism. The reason you don't see a lot of it is, one, it's very difficult to do. Two, it's difficult to do well. Most people don't want to pay for that. And whereas I have, you know, art in Oklahoma it's not the mecca for art. And, you know, when I first started sculpting, my work in Georgia, Atlanta, Florida, you know, they recognized me there. Here has an attitude of, well, if you're successful, why are you an artist in Oklahoma? Well, it was the people that actually brought me back to Oklahoma. Everybody was just laid back, friendly, and I'll never forget in LA, I forgot the name of the highway, but it took 45 minutes to go 3 miles. And I had a motorcycle. I remember when I first got there, Linda I came in, I looked in the mirror, and I had a great tan. I took my goggles off. And she goes, "What were you doing today?" And I said, "Well, I was out riding." She goes, "This was a stage 3 smog alert. You're not supposed to be out there." And it wasn't a tan, it was smog that discolored me. So.
Well, you did tell me a little funny story about Marty Averett and your, I guess, first encounter with the art classes at OSU. I wonder if you'd mind repeating that real quickly.
Not at all. I had picked OSU. There again, people were very important to me. OSU was just a friendly place. My sister had gone to school there, and so I was familiar with the campus. And I was familiar with the kind of the nightlife back then, and I thought, well, I'll take night classes, and that'll keep me out of trouble. So I see this art class figure drawing, so I go there, and this very nice looking naked girl walks up to me, and I'm inside going, wow, this is college, this is great. And I'm there probably 2 or 3 weeks, and the instructor comes up and says, "Shan, how old are you?" And I tell him I'm 17. I think I may have just turned 18. And he goes, "Well, this is a graduate course. You're not supposed to be in here. This won't count. But since your illustrations are better than anyone here at the moment, you can stay if you wish." So.
But you did go on to OCU after OSU. You spent.
I went to CSU, I think is what it was called.
CSU in Colorado?
Central State.
Okay, Central State.
I don't know what they call it now. Here, Central Oklahoma. UCO?
I think that's it now. But it was Central State at the time.
My brother Clancy was going there. He goes, "You ought to try it." And he knew a lot of the instructors. And I did. I enjoyed it.
Declared an art major?
Yes. However, I've always marched to a different drummer. I've just kind of, I love history. I love, and I know this doesn't go on very well, but I never felt like the piece of paper was going to do it for me. I've had many discussions with friends that own companies that go, "Well, I wouldn't hire someone that didn't have a college degree," and well, that's, tell that to, well, I can think of more millionaires without college degrees than with college degrees. So.
Did you use your?
Did
you finish at Central State?
No, I did not. I
Okay.
never graduated. And I mean, there were times when I'd go to the class and not show up for the final, and knowing full well that there would come a time when I had to pay for those classes.
But then you did eventually, I guess, after some oil field work.
That's what I was going to
commercial-
tell. That's what I was going to say.
Get that degree.
Realistic
job.
work, classical work, was literally pounded out of every. And at the time, there were some good illustrators there, but by and far, I noticed that you were abstract or modern. That's what they'd push you toward. And then it dawned on me, the really good ones could draw well and could draw classical figures. And it was almost like I had an argument with not an argument really, but a heated discussion. He said the ability to draw was no longer necessary in art. And I said, if you had 2 students and one drew exceptionally well and conveyed a still life exactly as it was, like a photograph, and then you had another fellow that struggled and could barely interpret what he was seeing to a piece of paper, and then you took those 2 different artists and turned them loose on an abstract piece of work, and then the one that draws like a photograph says, "This is exactly what I wanted to convey," I'll believe him. The one who couldn't draw and sits there and goes, "This is what I envisioned," no, I don't buy it. You couldn't even draw what was in front of you. And to me, that's pretty logical. But I did notice there were a lot of instructors that would have a difficult time, because art's a really tough market.
So, after working for the advertising agency, then one of the first
We
art
grew.
jobs that you got?
I ended up leaving I was the art director. There was just he and his wife and myself, and we won 3 or 4 big campaigns. And when I left, because I got married in '85, and my wife said, "Do you want to sculpt?" And I said, "Yes." And she goes, "Go for it." And she had a job at the time that was it covered us, and it's funny, but when I left, I think there were 6 artists, and the company had grown from 3 to 14 people. So we did real well.
You did. And had you been sort of doing sculpture on the side while you were working for the company?
Not really. I mean, I dabbled, but nothing finished, nothing that I thought was worthy of casting. That was another thing, that being a commercial artist, learning that trade, prepared me for being self-employed and being a sculptor, because I would never finish anything. It was never good enough. It was incomplete. Well, as an advertisement, they'll give you an assignment at noon, and you have to turn it in at 4, whether you like it or not. And it forced me to complete things and meet deadlines, and that was invaluable later on. So
you felt like you had the tools, you were ready to
yes.
to try that. Did you start off in galleries, or did you enter competitions? How did you go about?
As I told in that earlier story about I refused to enter any competitions. Well, if you're going to enter the public domain in art, you've got to enter. But I rationalized that, well, they're paying good money, so I will swallow my pride and let so-and-so judge me, if so be it. So, I'm trying to remember how I landed my first commission, but it worked out well. I do remember learning. I had gone to work in a marble shop to learn how to work with stone, not realizing that there were like 2 whole different avenues, like airplanes and cars, both transportation, but neither one match. So the fellow who owned the marble shop goes, I was ordering this 2 foot by 2 foot white Carrara stone. He asked me what I was doing, and it was really expensive. I want to say it was like $5 or $6 grand, and it weighed an unbelievable amount. And he goes, "What are you going to do with this? It's a big doorstop. I mean." I told him, he said, "Well, you know what? Why don't you come watch how the shop works and how we fabricate things, and this will give you an idea on how things are done." And so I kind of did a back door into stonework.
Now, was that in Oklahoma?
Yes, it was.
Okay.
And Young Brothers, who were just a fabulous place. Dean Harvey passed away quite a few years ago, but his parents are the ones that helped me in the very beginning. That he probably didn't realize how much help he was. But I digress. It was at that point I was still doing the commercial work when Mike Wigley, who owned a gallery up on North Mace, said, "Hey, Shan, there's a lady who's a really fine sculptress who needs some help, some manual help. Her name's Shirley Thomson-Smith. Would you give her a hand?" And I said, "Sure." And so I went and helped Shirley, and she kind of gave me the inside dope on how things operate and work, and the economics of it.
And she works mostly in stone.
Well, bronze.
Okay.
Her work looks a lot like stone because of the patina she chooses, and a lot of people think it's stone, but really that's a patina. She has a couple of pieces in stone, I believe, but by and far they're mainly bronzes. There are some ceramics. Shirley's a wonderful person, wonderful.
So that was like an apprenticeship that you.
It was, though I have one thing to my credit. I'm pretty mechanically oriented. I'm one of those kind of Renaissance guys when it comes to, I want to know why something works the way it does. So I've never been afraid of saws or lasers or anything like that. And but I'll never forget, she called and she was practically in tears. And she had been commissioned to do this clay piece. She refused to use an armature, and her pieces were solid clay. Well, that's okay. You can get away with that when the pieces are small. I kid you not, this piece was about 3.5 feet high. It weighed about 400 pounds. It was so heavy it crushed the pallet it was on, and it was so heavy it embedded itself into her shag carpet. So where the nails would grab, you couldn't pull it, you couldn't move it. It was breaking in two, and I always laugh because I learned very early. There's a reason why you use armatures, and it also gives you the ability to go outside your central plane. If you have a cantilever design, you have to have the ability to hold that up in the air. And about that time, I had done a piece. I thought, well, I'll do this. I felt moved to do this angel, and it was done in kind of a Renaissance fashion. John Free, who owns the foundry in Bahuska, senior. John Jr. and I are the same age, and we became very good friends. He kind of took me under his wing and gave me the ins and outs on how things were done, and explained, why some artists fail. Of all the mediums, sculpting's the most expensive, just because of the material.
Right.
And you can get in trouble real quick. Well, if you order all your bronzes at once, you can save probably off the top 25% of your overall cost. And I took a gamble on the angel, and it sold out within a year.
How many in the edition?
Now, there were only 11 in the edition, but it was a real expensive piece. It was about a $7,500 piece, and that's 25 years ago. So, but there again, I also learned from Mike. He liked me, and Wiggly said, "Bring your piece, and I want to put you next to this Jackson." It was a land run. There were only 3 in the, I'm sorry. It was a cattle drive, not a land run. It was it was nearly $350,000 for this small bronze.
And this is in a gallery.
In a
we're
gallery.
talking about, in Oklahoma
It was a
City.
higher end gallery.
Right.
It was probably the high end gallery at the time. Mike has since moved to Santa Fe and has he just had a wonderful sense of presentation. But he took this angel, and remember I told you it was $7,500? Well, he put $25,000 on it and stuck it next to that Jackson. And he said, "Watch." And I did, as the couple came in, and the man and woman went back and forth about it. They both liked the angel. He liked the lot, or he liked the price. She liked the Jackson, but we think she liked it because of the price. So she could say, yes, that's $350,000. And you could tell he really liked my piece when it came to writing that check, because they bought the big one. They didn't buy my piece. So, but it taught me a lesson about where you put your work is very important. Well, at that point you learn real quick. If you're a newcomer in the gallery market, you're at the whim and fancy of the gallery owner. If he wants 50%, 60%, okay, you have to weigh it, okay. You'll probably get more for your piece because he's not going to put some low range price on it. He's going to put a high range price on it. But you'll still make less overall. And as Mike has taught me, they're taking the best gamble, because once you become established and people seek out your work, they're behind the 8 ball at that point. You can go to another gallery if you want, or worse still, and I won't mention names, backdoor the gallery, which means, for you uninitiated out there, it's where you tell a client who's come to your house, "Well, go over to this gallery and look at that work, and I can get that work for you." And I promised myself I would never do that. And apparently a lot of artists do, because they don't understand that, this guy's lighting's bill may be $5,000 a month. The air conditioning lighting. You know, it chews a lot of electricity up. I think that was the saddest thing. It's the conflict that arose from galleries and the artists. Because the artist likes to think that the world moves behind them. But I taught this one little girl. I knew she had a lot of talent. She's a great painter. She went to Savannah Art Institute. When she got back, she called and told me this man had approached her, and normally she got about $8,500 for her murals, and he was offering her nearly 18 grand for a mural, and he would cover all the supplies. He was just buying it outright, and she did it. She was ecstatic, and she gets the front of the Chicago Tribune for the mural for the new Chicago Library, of which they paid, I want to say, $38,000 for the mural. Well, it upset her that he had made more than she made. And I had to explain to her, I said, one, you're unknown. This was a huge break for you. I can't tell you how many painters out there would give their eye teeth to say, my piece is hanging at the Chicago Library. To me, that's just kind of a no-brainer. But, you know, artists, they all march to a different drummer. So.
And it's probably not easy for sculptors to wholesale, I don't imagine, to galleries. You haven't done that much because of the...
And for some reason, I got hooked up to doing commission work, which was great for me. I didn't have to worry about going to different galleries. I'd gone the gallery route and realized there were too many personalities that, one, I didn't care to work with. They were, you know, fair enough. They were all right, but it just wasn't something. And John Free, senior, said, Shan, avoid working with committees. Always answer to one person. And that was the best advice I got, because everybody has an idea. And I'll never forget, we were already in metal for the Shannon Miller when one of the committee people came up to me with a drawing they had done of what they thought it should look like. And I said, I wanted to be diplomatic, and I said, well, you know, the reason I didn't use that design, because I thought of it, was if you make it big, are you going to be able to see her face? Well, no. Oh, okay. But what amazed me was we were already in metal. The main money had already been transferred, but they were ready to change in midstream the horse we were on.
Well, what do you think was your first kind of breakthrough commission?
Probably Shannon Miller, because it was the most visible.
Can you explain who commissioned that and how?
Well, that was interesting. Blair Buswell was being proposed by a part of the committee. You know, he's from Utah. And I don't want to go there. It gets real political. Though I had a really good team here in Edmond that they had rules that we all had to follow. And there were probably 7 or 8 people that had applied to do the commission. And I know Blair, he's a great guy. I was the only one to do a maquette, and that was what they asked for. And he shows up and goes, well, you know, if you want me to do her jumping over a globe, and I'll do that.
But
pointing at my design, he's going, if you want me to do that, I'll do that. And it's pretty funny if you think about it.
And you really did capture, we'll look at it at the end of the tape, but you've got the very
it was so much
iconic
fun.
Gymnastic pose there.
You know, it's one particular pose that she does in competition. It was off the balance beam, and she was here. And I'll never forget, she was in the kitchen. We didn't live here at the time, it was the other kitchen. She literally kicks the back of her head. She goes, well, Shan, as I come down and land on that foot, my back foot comes and touches my ponytail. But artistically, it doesn't look good. It closes up and it doesn't look right. It looks awkward. And so I had already done all this work, and of course the armature allows me. So I go ahead and mutilate the work and bend it so she can see what it looks like the way she wanted. She goes, oh, you're right, that doesn't look right. And I said, well, that's why. And she goes, okay.
So she got
So
to come out and see it.
she
The
worked,
maquette.
yes, and
Did you work from photographs or actual
yeah, I
photos?
took lots of photographs of her.
Right.
She posed, I guess she came 3 or 4 times for a couple hours each time. And, you know, she's such a little bitty thing that it was just an honor to and that's, for some reason, I gravitated towards sport medium people. And I guess it's because I played sports. It kind of enabled me to kind of understand certain things that some artists wouldn't understand. But I have really been blessed to be around some really unique individuals that are really fun. Warren Spahn's my favorite by far, just because he and I both smoked, and he'd always go, "Shan, go find us a place to smoke." And Greg Spahn told me this story that toward the end of his life, they called. This is that Mayo Clinic called Greg and said, "We've lost your father." Probably the long term to use to the guy. They meant they physically lost him, that he disappeared, and he was down in the loading dock smoking cigarettes with the workers.
Oh.
Had his IV with him, and he was
Now this is he was a baseball player, is that
the
right?
world's greatest left-handed pitcher in Major League Baseball.
Yeah, I was interested in your in the question of, because you also did Muskogee Creek baseball player Allie Reynolds.
Now that's
and I was thinking, here you have to do a bust of someone who's so very athletic. You're not doing a full figure. What's the challenge in that, doing a bust of an athlete?
That's probably one of my best pieces, the Allie Reynolds. The little nuances that, you know, if the sculpture looks like it's about to speak or breathe, you've done your job. And that's really hard to do, to get that final look out of metal, because that's all it is metal, one medium monochrome tone. I don't know if you looked at Allie Reynolds, but
I've just photographs.
and you know, since this is what it is, and I'll be talking to other art students, you know if a piece is good or bad. And I can promise you, most of my work is mediocre at best, in my opinion. But that's just because, one, you got to weigh things time frame wise. If you've only got 4 weeks to do 3 characters and they're life size, then you're going to lose. A friend of mine taught me the rule of 3 is you can have things cheap, you can have them fast, or you can have great quality. But you can't have all 3. You can have 2 of them, but you can't have 3 of them. And that really is true. If you want quality, you're going to give up either time or the financial end of it. And that has proved to be the case over and over again. But back to Allie Reynolds. He and Dr. Zudi. I did the bust of Zudi, and that really looks like Dr. Zudi. And Dr. Zudi said so. He's and I became friends, and he really liked my work. But I really felt like I caught him. And but I was about to say his wife said so too, and that's who you have to please, the spouse, because the spouse knows the figure better than anyone. They look at that person more than anyone. So if you get the spouse on board, you're home safe. And more often than not, it's a female that you're pleasing.
How you were one of the Oklahoma Centennial artists, and perhaps those sculptures were done in connection with that. I don't know, but
Which ones? Really?
Was the Spalding?
No, the Atlanta Braves commissioned me to do that.
Okay.
It originally was done for Atlanta.
You were one of the Oklahoma Centennial artists, and I wonder if you can tell us what that involved. And
Well, I don't know why they liked my work so much, but I was very excited because they picked me on quite a few projects. I was told that I had more projects out than anyone.
was it 6? That's what I read. I don't know if that's correct or not.
That's probably right. I think they grandfathered in one of the pieces that had been done before the official and said it was. But no, they, as I mentioned earlier, it's great being able to work with the individuals that have been honored, because they all share one, they all have great work ethics. Even the Miss America's work ethic was probably greater than Warren's work ethic. I mean, it's a lot of work being Miss America. And of course, that job I'll look back on with a certain amount of pride, certain amount of angst. I signed on knowing I only had 3 months to do to do 3 figures. And these are Miss Americas. I mean,
The ones from Oklahoma.
and Shan, do you think Miss America knows what she looks like or not? I mean, they're going to be extremely particular. However, the design I submitted, because of the time, was 3 robed, like the women at the well. It's kind of a classical where they're in robes, and because I was told it was the face that they were really concerned with. Well, after the first week, it was in no uncertain terms I was going to do it in their winning gowns, and one had maybe 2,000 little pearls on the dress. I think it was Susan. But I thought the piece turned out very, very well for the time given to execute it.
And did that go in the city of Edmond or
Oklahoma City University.
Oklahoma City University?
Which, and there again, you get, not only do you meet these people, you also meet the institutions, and are remarkable. To think more New York Rockettes came out of Oklahoma City University than any other place in the country is pretty amazing. And then, of course, they have, Oklahoma's had, what is it, 6 now, Miss Americas?
Can you name the 3 real quickly if you
Jan
can?
Giroux,
Okay.
Susan Powell, oh my gosh, Shirley Smith. I can't believe I've drawn a blank.
We can add that in
Thank
later.
you. Thank you.
And then what was another public? Because part of the point of the
James
Centennial
Garner.
artist was these public works kinds of projects, right?
James Garner was
oh,
really,
I bet that was fun.
he's just as you think he is. He's just as easygoing and amiable as can be. Funny side story to that, his wife did not go to all the events that were planned. And when I first saw her, I thought, wow, a trophy wife. Well, it turns out she's actually 8 years older than he is. And my sister goes, get the name of her plastic surgeon. Because she looked like she was 40 years old. A young 40. I mean, she looked great. Beautiful woman. And surely that's a compliment, isn't it? I mean, but I was thinking he was 78. That put her at 86. And they had events planned from 7:30 in the morning all the way till 10 at night. And that would tax anybody. And so I could see why she didn't come to every event. But he was great. He was he kept close ties with 3 or 4 individuals at Norman to this day.
Wow.
And just down-to-earth fellow, just really a super guy. And it's been really advantageous to my daughter, who's got to meet all these people and see they put on one shoe at a time.
Right.
And there again, work ethic always comes through, what people are willing to do to achieve their goals. And then there's Billy Vessels. That was the original. There again, I'm not making excuses, but what happened was I was the first artist to be picked to do one of the Heisman winners. And we did it to a certain scale, 1 1/4 size. And it got outside the control of whoever was in charge with the overall design of the game plan. And so the second one they put up was colossal size. It was 15 feet tall. So you had Mutt and Jeff there.
Right.
And wherever they got it cast, the casting, well, it suffered because of the size, and there again, that rule of three. You want it fast, money, quality. So they ended up having to redo Billy Vessels to get it bigger. Well, their budget had already been spent on the other four. And it was just a real nightmare. I wish I wouldn't have gone there, because the first one turned out great. The second one was out of my hands, and we had to get it up in just a record short amount of time. So I was real disappointed in the final quality of that piece. But there again.
Yeah, I can see as an artist how frustrating that would be, because you feel like, as you say, it's out of your control, and
You don't get to do the well. You don't get to do.
Yeah.
You can if you have the time. And the piece I'm probably happiest with in Norman with James Garner is the Veterans Memorial. That turned out really well. That was a short design notice. They asked me, and I had like 2 days to come up with a design, and it just hit on all cylinders. The each side of the five-sided obelisk. You know, obelisks are supposed to be four-sided, but there are five services: Coast Guard, Army, Marines, Navy, and Air Force, and they all wanted to be represented. And of course, there's an eagle that's either descending with the flag in its claws, its talons, or it's taking off with the flag or the talons. But everybody seems to enjoy that piece. They're happy with it.
I'll look forward to seeing that. Well, your most publicized project has undoubtedly been The American, and that's still in the works. I wonder if you can kind of talk about it, because it's a very monumental piece. What inspired you to want to do it?
I always wanted to do a very large piece, but it had, I think good sculpture tells a story. I don't care if it's modern. It evokes some kind of emotion. I always wondered why there was nothing that saluted or honored my Native American heritage. And the older I got, I realized there were so many things involved. I was approached a week before they announced they were going to do a competition for the Capitol Dome. And I thought they had already picked the artist. But I was assured that it was going to be a straight race, and everybody was, Well, I kind of felt that this idea about the young eagle on a young brave, because of my love of history, I understood we're a young country, and these things that we think were a long time ago were not long ago at all. But the ideals evoked by the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, they just haven't improved on that. And if we follow it to the letter, then, we're going to be okay. When they announced that Senator Haney had won the competition, one of my benefactors called me and said, Shan, the Daily Oklahoman ran a competition of the 6 sculptures and asked the people what they thought. And I think I ended up with 52% of the vote. Senator Haney had 21% of the vote. And then the remaining 37% was divided among the other 4 artists. But for me to garnish 52% of the vote was fantastic. And he said, that's the sculpture you need to make big. Now at the time it was only 60 feet tall, and we were doing it for a small museum up northeast.
Northeast
And
United States or Oklahoma?
Oklahoma.
Okay.
And we ended up raising it to a little over 113 feet. When a fellow here said, look, it's 13 million, I'll give you 10. You raise the 3. Well, I raised $3 million in a week, and I thought, wow, this is easy. But he goes, you know what? We need an elevator in it. Well, an elevator won't fit in a 110 foot, 113 foot. 11 stories seemed like a height, but it really isn't. And so it had to go up to 156 feet just to the top of his head to fit a small elevator. Well, they're all
This
small.
is one of the investors that...
Yes. And at the time, they just started, or they were midway through the Indian Cultural Center down on the river. And they were afraid that it would, this was going to be a gift to them. It was paid for. It was great shape. They thought it would confuse their attempts to raise money to finish that project. Well, Blake Wade, head of the Centennial Commission, felt it was a good enough idea and strong enough piece that he recommended it to Mayor LaFortune in Tulsa. Well, Mayor LaFortune jumped on it. And during that time frame, bear in mind, all this fell in my lap just almost immediately. And I, like I said, raised that $3 million in the first week. I thought, well, this isn't any big
This
thing.
won't be hard.
And we were coming in at $30 million just to do a 15-story body, human being. This top of his head, bottom of his feet was 156 feet, and then that was 217 feet to the tip of the eagle. This elevator goes up this leg and goes into a mezzanine, and then there's an observation area right here, and then there's a double helix stairwell that goes up into the head, so you can actually look out through the stair. Oops. What is it? Am I going into too much detail here?
No.
The cost was greatly influenced by, at the time, bronze was, I want to say it was $1.40 because it was copper.
Right.
Well, they were using so much copper and strategic metal in China 8 years ago that any copper-based product went from I want to say it was $1.17 up to $5.70 within just a 14-month period, and that really made it hard to calculate the exact cost. During this time frame, I'm still doing other projects, and I'd learned through my love of history, Gutzon Borland and Mount Rushmore, he said, don't take government money, don't do it, go to the private sector. Same with, why am I having a hard time remembering the Statue of Liberty's sculptor? Not Garibaldi? No, that's not right.
Garibaldi, I think that might be right. We can insert that too.
It'll probably come to me here in a moment. But I bring that up because when I had to present to a particular government official, he goes, well, you're doing this because you want to be famous. And there were like 30 people in the room, maybe 50. But I said, I'll bet $1,000 right now there's nobody in this room that can name me who did the Statue of Liberty and Mount Rushmore. And there wasn't one person. And he looked at his fellow government guys and nodded, okay, right.
Well, and that's really interesting because the average layperson is not going to be thinking in terms of, you get this quote, it'll cost this much, and 8 years later the material prices have totally changed. Where are you now with the project?
And this isn't going to be published for a while, right?
Right.
Because
it might be 6 months, and you don't have to.
Well, this will all be behind us. We made an agreement when we put together our private placement memorandum, which is a contractual agreement with the investors. The SEC requires us to not do any kind of interview with the press.
Oh.
If we mention that we are raising funds, or we have all our funds together, anything to do with money,
yeah,
it's called unintentional solicitation of funds. and
Well,
they
let's-
pull our contract.
Yeah, let's kind of just, you know what, I think we should just skip all of the financial discussion.
Well,
And
now
ju-
I can tell you though, because it's going to be over with. Once Sand Springs passed that bond issue, because we always had our core group, we needed to know that 1/3 of the investment money came from wherever it was going to sit, because it had to have somebody speak up for it in all
Right.
the political wranglings.
Right.
And once Sand Springs passed their bond issue and got their money, and we had our land, we're done.
Okay.
So we're ready to go, and I'm hoping to announce this summer. But I'm not in a big hurry because, see, I'm not done yet.
Right,
And
right.
I've still got other fish to fry and get out of the way
Right.
before that's done. But, you know, there's no reason this can't be like the world-class piece it's supposed to be. And that,
Oh, it's a gorgeous piece.
you know, somebody once made the comment, why don't you just scan a live human being and just and have them do it that way? And, well, they don't get it.
They don't get it. Well, that just reinforces the fact that, you know, when you're an artist, you have to wear this business hat. But I think especially in your work with large scale monumental sculpture projects, etc. How do you handle that? How do you put on that hat?
Some people say I have the patience of Job, because I've had to be very patient during the process. But I knew that I believe it's 28 years they worked on Mount Rushmore and 27 years for the Statue of Liberty, and we're just on year 9. And I have it on good authority that 4 years from now we'll be done. It'll be up, so we'll cut that time in half.
That's really exciting.
But I do know now why these monuments are not thrown up all over the country, because there's a lot of work involved.
Does Melanie or your daughter play a particular role in your art business?
Melanie, my wife, is the gatekeeper. Keeps me in line. Make sure that I don't get overextended, and to make sure that all the I's are dotted and T's crossed. I'm a handshake kind of guy, which in this day and age you really can't afford to do it that way. I mean, people mean well, but sometimes their mouths write checks that can't be cashed. So.
Well, I'd like to talk a bit about your philosophies and techniques. Before you get to the modeling stage for a sculpture, you do a number of sketches? Or?
In the beginning I did. As I got older, I did them in my head. I know that sounds somewhat, but I do. I work, good sculpture is 360 degrees. You should be able to be entertained from any angle. Dealing with the human form is real interesting, because we almost generally gravitate to the front, but the entire piece is something that requires attention. You know, if you're only as good as the smallest quality, or some of the details. Lighting is the key to anything in sculpture, and you're dealing with a static material. You're dealing with metal, and you're trying to breathe life into that metal and make it like it's ready to move. And if you accomplish that, you've done your job. There are many ways to attain that, but each piece kind of dictates what method you can approach it with. As I said in an earlier thing about two artists, and if you can draw photographically, well, that helps, because it means you understand lighting. The eyes, which are the window to the soul, are very important, but sometimes it's just a suggestion of just a dash of light that reflects, that gives you the personality of a piece. I've always enjoyed the challenge of your classical kind of work, because it doesn't take a discriminating eye to know if it's good or bad. It either looks like the person or it doesn't look like the person. And I'll tell you a secret. I did a job for a fellow once that he made me get rid of his 2 double chins and fix his broken nose and fix his lazy eye and put hair back on his head and to where it didn't look like him. He was thrilled with it and loved it. And I didn't sign it, but he was happy and I was happy. I laugh at that because of his recommendation or referrals, I've got more work. And but I remember that I've been told I was a little bit too nice because I let people dictate how they want something. But then again, I'm just a hired gun when it comes to commission work. I mean, if they want it that way, that's their business. Now I'm going to try to. I will put my event. I mean, I will make it look good. But it's something that, as I said earlier, people know if it looks good or it doesn't.
You sort of had to, I guess, figure out armature on your own. Are there any?
Well, going back to Shannon Miller, that's an extreme cantilever design where you have all this weight hanging from a back position. And all I could see was, 10 drunk fraternity guys jumping up and down on her, making her bounce off and it crashing down and killing someone. So I was given the name of a fellow named Louis Santizo. He's an engineer with Benham. This is going back 20 years. And I knocked on his door and said, "Hey, I'm so-and-so, would you give me a hand?" And then he figured out the diameter of steel I needed along with the type of steel I needed. And that steel that runs up her leg into the base is rated over 200,000 pounds PSI. That is like a $600 piece of steel that will hold a phenomenal amount of weight.
Wow.
So if somebody did get up there and jump on her, and I hope nobody does that, but it was guaranteed to withstand the test of time. Well, turns out he was eventually promoted to the head engineer at Benham. And Benham is a huge architectural firm, engineering firm, excuse me. And he is the lead engineer. He's retired now, but he came back for the American.
Oh,
And,
great.
He's wonderful. There's
So
a couple of side stories that are hilarious that it's amazing how there's no coincidences. Things happen for a reason. And Stuart Webb, who's still with the company full time and is a younger fellow, and he's kind of like the lead project manager on it. We just have a wonderful team. And that was another thing that helped establish the project is like our attorneys were McAfee and Taft, which I don't know much about attorneys until I started this project and realized that like they're the largest firm in the region. They have like 400 attorneys, and they liked the idea well enough to do the preliminary work and get paid on the back end. But people go, "Well, you haven't done that, and what did you do in 9 years?" Well, according to Benham and our financial people, we've spent nearly $4 million, and my wife really does love me because we spent our 401k for the project. We went to the wall on it. So I can look back and say, well, we bet it all to get it done. And there were times where I would have said, it's not worth it, because I was lied to a bunch. And it just really bothered me that people would behave that way. I mean, why do that? There was no point in doing that. And I thought if it wasn't that I got my friends involved in this project, I would have walked away. But I'd already got them involved.
You had a team.
And people were relying on it, so I persevered and followed through. So there's never any question that we wouldn't finish it.
Right.
It was always going to happen. It's just when. And you know what's funny? Being a half-breed, I've seen it all. Racism on both sides of the card. I won't mention the individual's name, but a very strong influence in Tulsa just said, we don't want a blanket Indian represent this city. And I had to laugh to myself. First of all, who are we? And fortunately, you don't have the say. You don't have the say whether or not. Now, I was told certain things were said and done to hope that I went away, and that didn't happen. So that told me the project was meant to be. So now it's my job to make it perfect. And perfection's hard to nail down. I don't know anybody that's done it yet, but you can get close.
What is your creative process once you get an idea?
I have the attention span of a gnat. I do not. I do understand what it takes to get focused and stay on task till you've got it done. But then I have to move on. This piece was unusual for the fact that it was originally designed to be 200 feet up, but only 25 feet tall. So this leg bent, kicked, looking straight on at it looks awkward. When you hold it up and look at it from a distance, it looks right.
Mm-hmm.
And people don't see that. Same thing with, there's some angles on him that just don't look right. But if you put him on the roof, he looks right, which sounds kind of weird, but...
And he's going to be on a hill.
He'll be on a hill, but
Yeah.
he's so big. He's 21 stories.
Right.
So we don't have to worry about, like, making his head bigger.
Right.
We just need to make him as perfectly... And there again, what's pleasing to me may not be pleasing to someone else. My dad looked like the Indian on a nickel. And that's kind of how I envision him. Though that is not the 150 faces that have been sent to me in the mail to use. This is the perfect Native American.
Mm-hmm.
So. This is why.
Yeah.
I did this preliminary, and somebody thought it was Chief Gray, because my dad and my cousin, Bud's boy, look a lot alike. And they go, "You're going to make it look like Chief Gray?" I mean, they were upset about that. No, I assure you, that's not Chief Gray. And that was another thing that kind of hurt the project early on. And I'm not ashamed to say this. I have a story for you. I had 3 or 4 chiefs tell me they were behind the project and loved the project. And when I'm ready to go, they're ready to get help. But once it ended up in Osage County, and I'm an Osage artist, and at the time, the Osages still may be involved somewhat, they just said they couldn't sell it politically. That they couldn't justify giving money to an Osage project. And I said, but it isn't. That's why it's a non-tribal...
Pan-Indian image.
And I go back to the story my dad told me once about Osages. He said, well, there are these 3 buckets, and they have crabs in them, but the one bucket's full of Osage crabs. Have you heard this?
I've heard a version.
And the fishermen come back in the morning, and the 2 buckets are empty, but the Osage bucket's still full. And the one fisherman asks the older one, why is it these other crabs get out and this center bucket stays full? And he goes, well, those are Osage crabs. When one starts to crawl out, the other's pulling back down.
How about your creative routine? Do you have do you work at night or in the morning? What's your routine?
Oh my gosh. That's normally I'd work late at night or into the wee hours, because being a one-man operation, Shirley and I used to talk about this. Answering the phone during the day to conduct business is very difficult. But that's when the business world works, so you're always having to entertain that. But the thing I miss most is, and I enjoy having young artists around, you kind of feed off the energy, and you don't have that when you work solitary. Or like when I worked at the ad agency, there were 6 other artists there. You kind of like get in. That's why I have to tell myself, go to art exhibitions, go to galleries, get charged up, because otherwise you're just left to your own devices, and it can be very tedious.
Mm-hmm. You renew yourself that way. Well, looking back over your career, what was a fork in the road moment when you could have gone one way but chose to go another? You might have mentioned it already, but...
Yeah, I mean, I mentioned the part about being wanting to be a homicide detective and a film director. that part about the accident, that was a big fork in the road, because I love sports, as I indicated earlier. I don't know if I indicated or not. We talked about it.
Yeah.
And I could no longer do the physical things for a couple of years. And that was tough. But I could use my left hand. So drawing was easy.
What would you say has been one of the high points of your career?
I think the individuals I meet, I just, and what a small world it is. Such a small world. I still have a hard time with politicians. I think it's the faces they wear that kind of make things different.
What's been one of the low points of your career so far?
Did I mention the politicians?
Yes.
The different faces they wear. I'm not sure there are any low points other than the part about being told one thing and that person had no concept at all what they were saying, or they knew and they just didn't care. But how can I gripe? I mean, I get to do things that other people dream about doing, and in fact, the other day I was at a motorcycle shop a buddy of mine owns, and I thought, man, it'd be fun just to work on bikes all day. But after about 15 minutes of thinking that, I went, what am I talking about? I get to sculpt and just sculpt. I can make a motorcycle if I want. So.
Well, is there anything we've forgotten to talk about or that you'd like to add before we take a look at the American and Shannon?
Oh, gosh. As I told you earlier, I hate boring people, so I don't really feel comfortable going into. I didn't realize what a big thing this monument meant to so many thousands of people. We still get letters from people that want to know the status and is there anything they can do to help. They want it done, and so that's another thing that's given me a lot of energy to go ahead and see the race through. And therefore another reason why it needs to be perfect, because it will be around a long, long time. And that didn't answer your question, though, did it?
It did. That's a nice,
Okay.
So neat to hear that people are responding that way. Well, okay, we're going to pause it for a minute and take a look at your work. Okay, we're looking at the American from another angle here. We could see it in the background earlier. And you were explaining to me the number of pieces that it's going to have to be cast in.
There's over 3,600 4.5 foot by 4.5 foot bronze plates. And there's a special software that allows us to mill each plate to 1/1000th of an inch accuracy. The scanning process wasn't even available to do this 9 years ago when we started. Roger and Alan down in Norman were doing the same software, and there's a word they use for when you write software, that they're doing in London for this 600-foot Buddha they're doing in India. But they're having to go to London to have their software done. Roger and Alan were ahead of the curve a year prior to that.
That's incredible.
We've had some wonderful people involved in the project.
We've got Shannon in view.
Okay.
I love that look of concentration on her face.
Thanks.
Anything you want to add about, you can see the measurements that you've written on there.
Yes, everything had to be upscaled, and that was the last, interesting enough, it was the first large scale monument I did, and it was also the very last of the old techniques done with plaster, chicken wire, foam, block, the old white foam that for filler. you'll hear me use other terms about foam, and it's a completely different method where they have these huge DuPont made foam blocks that the milling machine will come in, and you could actually carve them with hand, or the milling machine could come in and scan your smaller maquette and then come in and give you a rough out, and it saves you a huge amount in clay.
Wow, that's really interesting.
It really is, and there again, economics, and for any my young students, I'll tell them, I said, you know, I didn't think math was that important, or English. One, you have to be able to communicate your ideas. If you're going to ask someone for $100,000 for a project, you got to be able to communicate, and usually it's in a written form. You have to do that. That's why you want to learn English. Then you want to go to the math part, because you better figure out how much a project's going to cost, because there are too many artists' skulls and skeletons out there that are. There's one big piece here in Oklahoma that they didn't do their math, and they got behind the 8 ball on it. And that's a classic example of an artist going, well, this costs this much and that costs that much, and I'll just multiply it by 10. And then realizing, well, I left out that part. I should have multiplied it by 20.
Right. Well, thank you very much for your time today, Shannon.
Well, I hope I don't bore anybody. It's interesting. I like doing it. And at the same time, I don't. I really don't. It's kind of weird. It's a love-hate thing. But the positives far outweigh the negatives.